1950s Science Fiction Podcast, Season 3, Episode 4. Tom Corbet, Space Cadet. Hello, and once again, welcome to the 1950s Science Fiction Podcast, a podcast on sci fi movies, radio dramas, TV series, and books produced during the decade of the 1950s. Whether you are a subscriber, returning listener, or a new listener, I hope my presentations are informative and enjoyable. Now, on to the show. Today's topic is one of the first sci-fi TV series aired in the 50s, Tom Corbet, Space Cadet. The show ran on all three major TV networks and the now defunct Dumont network. The TV series broadcasted from 1950 to 1955. It was also a radio drama and comic series. The show's producers sold Tom Corbett merchandise such as school lunch boxes and toy rockets. The major sponsors were Kellogg's Cereal and other various lesser-known companies. The show, designed for a juvenile audience, could be enjoyed by adult viewers. The series demonstrated fine acting from the cast members following excellent scripts. I have previously discussed Tom Corbett in a guest segment for the Star Pog Log podcast, show number 20. I talked about the highlights of an article first published in Starlog magazine in 1980, and it was a first-person account from the actor who played Tom Corbett, Frankie Thomas. The actor reminisces about his selection for the role and the start of the series. The actor also discusses the changes the cast faced during the show's production. My segment can be heard at the 1 hour and 29 minute mark of the show. To listen, simply go to starpoglogpodcast.blogspot.com. That is starpoglogpodcast.blogspot.com. And I will provide a link to my show notes, a link to it in my show notes page. The setting. Tom Corbett, Space Cadet, is set some 400 years into the future, and space travel has become commonplace. Humans have colonized other planets in the solar system and the moons around them, and created space stations in between planets. The Star Guard was created to protect spaceways and assist others in case of danger. Tom and his two friends, Astro and Roger, are cadets in the Star Guard Academy. The series follows them during different adventures that either take place in outer space or on a planet or a space station. While traveling in outer space, Corbett and his fellow cadets are issued a Star Guard rocket ship called the Polaris. The Polaris can dock at a space station or land on another planet. The TV series. The TV series was produced by Joseph Green, who first wrote a comic strip entitled Space Cadets, but was never published. The series was also partially inspired by Robert Hineline's novel Space Cadet, published in 1948. The producers got permission to use the Space Cadet title from Hineline, and the TV series went into production in 1950. The episodes ran from 15 to 30 minutes in length. The first show was aired on the 2nd of October 1950 on the CBS television network. The following year, it was broadcasted on ABC and then to other networks during the first half of the 1950s. The reason for all the changes in TV networks was due to ratings. During the early 50s, the TV industry in the U.S. was booming. Some networks would have more affiliated stations one year, and the rival would have more the following year. Therefore, the producers would go with the networks with the most potential viewers. The growth of the TV industry in the 50s was not unlike the growth of the internet in the 21st century. The TV series starred Frankie Thomas as Tom Corbett, Astro was played by Al Markham, and Roger was played by Jane Merlin. All three cadets enrolled in the Space Academy of the Star Guard. In each episode, they would engage in a Three Musketeer-like adventure story, but set in outer space during the future. The show was broadcasted live, however, it was recorded by using the kinescope process. This method was used to record programs before the invention of videotape. It involved the use of a TV monitor and a motion picture camera synced together to record the image. Some surviving episodes of Tom Corbett Space Cadet series can be found on YouTube and are in watchable condition. I have two of them. I've watched two episodes already, and I'll have an episode of the show on my Vocal Media page. Unfortunately, I'm not able to provide an excerpt from the show on the podcast track, but I'm simply not able to download from YouTube as of yet. The episode I watched and embedded on my Vocal Media page is called Outpost of Danger. It was broadcasted on September the 26th, 1953 by the Dumont TV network. The story is about how Tom and his fellow cadets resolve a crisis in a colony infected by deadly disease once thought extinct. They must help keep the colony intact while in quarantine and prevent the assistant administrator of the colony from taking command. The assistant wants to evacuate while his superior wants to stay and wait for supplies. Radio drama. At the same time the TV series was produced, a radio drama version of the show was broadcast on ABC Radio. The radio series was based on the episodes of the TV show and ran from January to June of 1952. There were some radio scripts produced before the TV series that never aired. After the success of the TV series, a companion radio drama was approved. I found some of the radio episodes on the Internet Archive website. I have downloaded and listened to one episode. The episode is part one of a two-part story. Part one will air on Tuesday evenings, while part two was on Thursdays. I listened to part one of the story called Trial in Space. The radio play is about Tom's fellow cadet, Astro, is experiencing some problems traveling in space. He does undergo some medical exams, and it's not favorable for him. I will play the intro of this episode on the podcast track, while you can find the complete episode at the Internet Archive.
Kellogg's Pep, the build-up wheat cereal, invites you to rocket into the future with Tom Corbett, Space Cadet.
Stand by to raise ship.
Blast off -5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0! Roaring rockets blast off to distant planets and far-flung stars. We take you to the age of the conquest of space with Tom Corbett, Space Cadet. Like a large silvery bullet, the rocket cruiser Polaris hurtles toward Earth, heading for a landing on the Academy spaceport after a long training cruise. Inside the ship, the crew prepares for touchdown with the ease of long practice. At the controls sit Tom Corbett and his astrogator, Roger Manning, while Astro stands by below on the power deck. And as the ship falls through the successive layers of atmosphere, gaining momentum, Tom and Roger stare through the viewport at the round ball of Earth rushing up to meet them.
What's our altitude, Roger? 100,000 feet, Tom. Keep giving me altitude. 90,000 feet. We'd better start braking. Control deck to power deck. Check in.
Already got it.
Okay, Astro. Stand by to blast braking rocket.
Right, Tom. Ready whenever you are.
What did you say?
I'm all set, Tom.
Oh, okay. Couldn't hear you for a second. 70,000 feet. Hit them now, Astro. Braking rockets 1/4. Astro, acknowledge. Something's wrong down there, Roger. Something will be wrong up here, too, if we don't start braking. Down to 50,000. Take over the controls. I'm going down to the power deck. Blast, Junior, blast, or we're going to splash ourselves all over Space Academy.
Literature. The Tom Corbett series had a series of TV tie-in comics and juvenile novels. The comics were published by Dell Publishing from 1952 to 1954. The first issues were stories intended to get feedback from the fans. If successful, the comic would become a TV script later on. After issue number 4, Dell published a standalone stories for the comic book series, separate from the TV show. Once the popularity started to diminish, Dell stopped printing the comic. If you're interested in reading a Tom Corbett comic book, you can find some issues online in the Internet Archive. There were 8 juvenile novels published by Gossett and Dunlap and written by various authors. The novels were published between 1952 and 1956. The first was called Stand By for Mars. The story tells how Tom met his friends at the Space Academy on the planet Mars. I have not read this novel. However, I have listened to a podcast that presented a reading of 2 chapters in the book. I would like to recommend the Gentleman's Spaceman's Atomic Hideout podcast hosted by Brad Grozowski. In each of his podcast episodes, he reads from a short story or book chapter originally published in the mid-20th century in either novel or digest format. You can follow him on Twitter at The Voice of Brad VO. That is The Voice of Brad VO, or learn more from his website, The Voice of Brad. I have embedded the podcast episode Stand By for Mars, Chapter 1, on my Vocal Media page. The podcast is available wherever you listen or download your podcast. My thoughts. The Tom Corbett series is very imaginative and sets the trail for other TV shows in the future. It produced excellent stories along with good drama that made for great entertainment. This was at a time when television was a new medium and still just finding its way. The show may be campy in style, but it was a product of its time, and I think the stories still hold up today by today's standards. The show is still good family entertainment as well, and the various stories and plots only use mild violence. One scene that stands out with me the most is when Tom says to a fugitive outlaw that you are responsible for putting yourself in prison and not me, Tom Corbett of the Star Guard. I thought that line was spot on, educating the young audience that you are responsible for your actions. Conclusion. Well, that is all I have for now. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope to be back as soon as possible for another discussion on 50s sci-fi. I want to thank all those who have listened, subscribed, and downloaded to my podcast. Also, you can follow me or subscribe to my Linktree profile. Handle is EG1985. That is, I'm now on Linktree and can be found on Linktree. My profile handle is EG1985. Here you'll find links to social media and the podcast. Thanks for listening.